Welcome to You Have My Sword. Today we are talking about an iconic DILF in Middle-earth, so let's talk about it. Elendil, one of the daddiest of daddies in Middle-earth. We talked about him a bit in episode 13, and honestly he's so dope that you all deserve to know more, hence this episode. If you listen to episode 13, you'll know a little bit about him. He was a man of many names. He was often referred to as Elfwin, which translates literally to elf friend. His street names were Elendil the Tall and Elendil the Fair, or Veranda, which means the faithful. Personally, I refer to him as ElenDILF. Okay, Behe, are you co-hosting this episode too? You can't help yourself? Okay. So, he was called Elendil the Tall because he was described as being a man and a half tall, upwards of 7 foot 11 inches. He is one of the very few characters where Tolkien made mention of their height, and this was a signature feature of Elendil. Elendil was a man of Numenor who led the survivors of its downfall to Middle-earth, where they founded 2 realms in exile, Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. Elendil, for good reason, became the first king of both realms and also held the title of the first High King of the Dunedain, which made him the supreme overlord of all exiled Numenorians in the lands to the east of the Great Sea. Elendil was known as the greatest warrior of all the Dunedain. He was killed alongside his elf friend, Elven King Gil-galad, by the Dark Lord Sauron at the Siege of Barad-dûr during the War of the Last Alliance in the late Second Age. Elendil also wielded the iconic longsword Narsil during the War of the Last Alliance. When it shattered in battle as Elendil was defeated, the handle and shard is then used by his son Isildur to cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand during the final battle of the war. As we know, Narsil would later be reforged into Anduril, the Flame of the West, to become the Sword of Aragorn. This is something I personally hope is touched on in the Amazon Prime Lord of the Rings series, and honestly, with the direction that it seems like they're going, it's not entirely impossible, so that's exciting. And if they don't cast the tallest man alive to play Elendil, they better put my mans in some heels. So we have a decent understanding of who Elendil was in regards to events that touch Lord of the Rings as we kind of know it, but let's go into his origin story a bit. Elendil was born in 3119 of the Second Age in Numenor. He was the son of Elendil, Lord of the Anduni, and the leader of the Faithful, a term for those who remained loyal to the Valar and didn't turn into Black Numenorians who followed the Dark Lord. The Faithful maintained a strong friendship with the elves and preserved the old ways against the practices of Ar-Pharazôn, their final king in Numenor, who kind of fucked it up for everyone by role-playing a buddy cop scenario with Sauron. Because of this, Sauron hated Elendil, and by extension, Elendil, the most out of all the Numenorians. Because Elendil and Elendil were like super good guys, obviously Sauron was not about that. Elendil and Elendil kind of fucked up a lot of Sauron's plans, so he was not a fan of them. Elendil was married to an unnamed Numenorian woman, no doubt of the same upbringing and noble blood, to which they had 2 sons, Isildur and Anarion. It is not known whether she followed him to Middle-earth after the fall of Numenor. And this is actually really interesting to me. Rarely, as we know, does Tolkien leave anyone unnamed, or at least give them some backstory to contextualize them, right? So the fact that Elendil, a power player in Middle-earth, has an unnamed wife with no backstory seems so strange to me. Imagine getting shipped with one of the biggest babes in history and you don't even get a name. That has big hiding your significant other on social media energy to me. Anyways, When Ar-Pharazôn and Sauron were preparing their assault on Valinor, Elendil told him to gather the faithful in Ravenna and escape to Middle-earth. Ravenna was the main seaport in Numenor, by the way. So Elendil is telling Elendil to gather the faithful and head to Middle-earth. Elendil did as his father told him and gathered the faithful and their wives and children in 9 ships and waited just off the coast. With them, they took the Palantiri, or the singing stones, that were given to the lords of Anduni by the elves of Tol Eressëa. We learned about the Palantiri in episode 13, so if you did not listen to that episode, you can go back and listen and it'll give you some context here. Elendil also took with him a seedling of Nimloth, the white tree of Numenor. When the downfall came, the great wave that devoured Numenor was thundering towards Ravenna when a great storm came out of the west, snapping the sails of his ships and tossing them around in the giant waves. This storm eventually carried him all the way to Middle-earth. With the downfall, Elendil and his children became the sole surviving descendants of the House of Eldros. So there was a storm due to Ar-Pharazôn fucking up and them being punished, but the kind of like, I guess the storm bands there kind of fucked up Elendil's ships, but the waves did push them all relatively safely, I guess. There were some casualties, but did push them to the shores of Middle-earth. Elendil's 4 ships were separated from those of his sons and arrived in Eriador, which is in northwestern Middle-earth. As he landed, Elendil proclaimed, "Out of the great sea to Middle-earth I am come. In this place will I abide, and my heirs unto the ending of the world." As his heir and 89th great-grandson Aragorn spoke these traditional words again when he took up the crown of Gondor at the beginning of the 4th Age. So that is directly after, the Lord of the Rings as we know it. How cool is that? Elendil was welcomed to Eriador by the Elven king Gil-galad in 2nd Age 3320. He founded the kingdom of Arnor, building the city of Numenor as his capital. The 5 ships carrying Elendil's sons landed further south, where Anarion founded the city of Minas Anor in Anorion, and his son Isildur founded Minas Ithil in Ithilien. They ruled the new realm of Gondor jointly as its kings from their capital city of Osgiliath. Across the realms, 2 towers were built for the Palantiri, with which the 2 kingdoms kept in contact. So, essentially, the ultimate landlines. Let's talk a little bit about the last alliance of elves and men. In time, Sauron returned to Middle-earth, establishing a stronghold in Mordor, which is essentially next to Gondor. In 2nd Age 3429, he attacked, seizing Minas Ithil. Isildur fled north to his father, leaving Anarion in charge of the defense of Gondor. In 2nd Age 3434, Elendil and Isildur returned south together with the Elven High King Gil-galad and their combined armies in the last alliance of elves and men. After defeating Sauron's armies and advancing into Mordor itself, the armies of men and elves settled into a siege of the main tower of Sauron, Barad-dûr, or the Dark Tower. During this siege, Anarion was killed. After 7 years of siege, in 2nd Age 3441, Sauron came out to personally do battle with his enemies. Elendil, together with Gil-galad, overthrew Sauron, but they were both killed in the process, and Elendil's sword, Narsil, broke when he fell. Like I mentioned above, Isildur used his father's broken sword to cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand. Vanquished, Sauron's spirit fled. Isildur built a hidden tomb for his father on the summit of the hill of Amon Anwar, the midpoint of Gondor. Later, with the creation of the kingdom of Rohan, the steward Sirion, who was the son of Boromir, had Elendil's casket moved to Arath Dinin in Minas Tirith. Let's talk a little bit about his legacy. Leading the remnant of the faithful Numenorians to Middle-earth, Elendil established strong regimes there and created the Great Alliance that put an end to Sauron's power for over 1,000 years. His bloodline and spirited leadership survived in the Dunedain of the north and the south of Middle-earth. That would in turn sire the brave and heroic men that would help bring a final end to Sauron in the War of the Ring. And here's a fun fact for you. Aragorn's battle cry in The Lord of the Rings was Elendil. He said Elendil's name as his battle cry. So let's talk a little bit about portrayal in adaptations. Okay, so Elendil does make a brief appearance in Peter Jackson's The Fellowship of the Ring at the Battle of the Last Alliance and was played by Peter Mackenzie. Unlike in the books, Elendil is killed by a blow from Sauron attempting to do battle instead of in a duel with him alongside Gil-galad. Which is so weak, why deprive us of even a glimpse of this battle? You've cast the characters, you're filming, this glossing over of like a titular scene is some whack fucking shit. Like, Peter Jackson, how dare you? You were right there, you could have done it. Anyways, instead, we get Isildur alone deals the fatal blow to the still living Sauron by cutting off his fingers with the broken blade of Narsil. And with them, the One Ring. Another deviation is Elendil's height, obviously. He is shown to be near the same height as most of his troops. Like I said, get this man in some heels. The height discrepancy normally wouldn't bug me with characters, but because he is one of the few characters that Tolkien shouts out as being especially tall, it does feel like a missed opportunity. You don't have to cast a large man, but use movie magic to make them look tall, right? Just like we used scope to make the hobbits look small, make this man look tall. How hard is that? Anyways, The Lord of the Rings Online. In The Lord of the Rings Online, Elendil appears in several flashbacks depicting the War of the Last Alliance. His ultimate fate is more acute to the books than to the films. He and Gil-galad seen battling and defeating Sauron at the cost of their lives, with Elendil dealing the killing blow. So we have some more book accuracy here in Lord of the Rings Online, which is fantastic. And with that, that concludes this episode. As always, you can find links to all socials and our Patreon over at uhmmmswordpodcast.com. You can gain access to the Discord via Patreon or my Ko-fi page. I've also been streaming games and chainmailing over at twitch.tv/Krysti Pryde, so come chat with me, send me hate mail, I don't know, whatever you're into. And I'll see you in the next one, and as always, you have my sword.
Edgeworks Nebula.